Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I'm Josh Hallman.
And we're in Christmas holiday week, and nobody's listening to this.
I think people are listening. They're with their families. They're looking for some time to think about screenwriting, and they're listening to the Act Two podcast, so thank you.
Hey, Mom and Dad, let's sit around the fire and listen to the Act Two podcast.
I've heard a lot of people are doing that this year.
Me too.
This is going to be great.
Well, listen, we're Act Two. We're a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This podcast is just one of the many things we do. I'm very excited for 2025, where we can start to tell you about the many, many other things that we're going to be doing. Lots of new fun things for the Act Two community.
Yeah.
I don't know, Josh. I guess let's talk about subscribing to the podcast, writing a comment, rating it. You can email us questions, topic suggestions. You can engage in many, many ways. And you can email us at ActTwoWriters@gmail.com, all spelled out, or on our Instagram and Twitter at ActTwoWriters.
Yeah.
I'm Story Thursday on Instagram, Tasha 3.0 on Twitter, and Blue Sky.
I'm Joshua Hallman on Twitter, probably Joshua Hallman on Blue Sky, and Josh Hallman on Instagram. You know, in an effort to get the podcast in the world a little more often, I added an RSS feed to our YouTube account, which, by the way, we have a YouTube account, which I would like for us to put more videos on there. Just have more stuff.
We will be putting more videos on there.
We will be putting more videos. And now you can find the Act Two podcast on YouTube.
Amazing. Does that mean that I have to shower before these now? Is that something that I have to do?
I think you should always shower, first of all.
Oh.
But second of all,
me too.
Yes. Little by little, I'm moving you into the visual format.
Oh God, it's my least favorite format.
We used to podcast in the dark.
We started a podcast for a reason. Yeah.
Oh, that's very true. But yeah, so how you doing, Tasha?
I'm tired.
Great. You look great.
Don't. This weekend was very busy with fun personal things, but I got nothing done in a weekend where I really needed to get a lot done.
Those are the best.
It's you can't regret it because you needed to do these life things, and that was ultimately more important. But I had lunch with a friend on Sunday, and it was a long lunch, 2.5 hours, because he's from out of town, so we never get to see him. And then afterwards, he's like, if you guys want, you can come back to our hotel. We can, have some drinks. And I was like, that sounds awesome. No.
Oh, no.
Because I had to go back and work, and it was stupid, but I did. And it was literally I worked an hour this weekend, and that was the only time that I could do it. It was after lunch and before D&D.
But you know what? Those are some of the, I love that D&D is the priority.
You have to.
An hour is great though. So just doing something, I think, is rewarding.
Yeah. And it was. I honestly think because my brain wasn't thinking about work the rest of the weekend, that 1 hour was exceedingly productive.
Was it pages? Did you get writing done, or was it production stuff?
It was neither. It was brainstorming with my manager on a story idea. And I think we broke some ground together.
Nice. In the 1 hour.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So our next episode will be our goal episode, which I think we both love.
Yes, it's the best one.
I'm excited about today's topic because of how it came to be.
Yeah.
However, I have a quick question for you. This is what I was going to text you and Paul. So I've been watching The Day of the Jackal.
Uh-huh.
And it got me thinking. I was like, man, if my significant other was a spy, what would I do? Or what would she do if I was a spy and an assassin? And so I asked her, I was like, hey, how would you feel about it? Yeah. And so we had this conversation about it. And then I was going to text you guys, if you found out that Paul was a cold-blooded assassin, the version that you know right now, would you stay with him?
Is he assassinating for good or for evil?
Well, he's a hired gun. He doesn't really even know who he's assassinating. And he is out of this world wealthy, like to the point where you just found out and he was like, babe, I want us to go live another life in a different country, you and I together. Let's just put this world behind us.
Oh, he's retiring.
He's not retiring. He's just choosing you, and maybe assassinating will come back in.
Like, I feel sick a little bit. This is a complicated, because, okay, a couple things come to mind. A, like, there's no doubt, love you. There's no doubt that his work will come home to him, which means we are in danger. However, if he's a cold-blooded assassin, it means that he can handle himself and protect me if that happens. However, I also know Paul hurts himself a lot. So is that a lie? That like, oh, my shoulder hurts or my back hurts. Like, that's a lie?
Yeah, no, it's all a lie.
Okay. So then he definitely could protect us. So maybe that's okay. But the fact that he kills in cold blood and like doesn't ask questions, like it could be a child. It could be like.
No. He wouldn't kill a child. Even the jackal has standards.
Okay. But it could be an innocent person who's just like in the way of an evil person.
Correct. Anything to get the job done.
And I think the fact he doesn't ask those questions and chooses amorality would be a problem for me.
Okay, so are you turning him in?
No, I'm not turning him in.
Wow. You're just leaving him.
We have things to talk about that may
so
not
you're
be
an accomplice
to be resolved. I mean, technically by law, but emotionally not.
All right, so that was to gear you up for a little rapid fire game. Are you ready, Tasha? This is to get everyone's juices flowing.
I'm ready.
Would you rather have control of the Bond franchise or the Mission Impossible franchise?
Bond.
Would you rather have written Jurassic Park or Home Alone?
Jurassic Park.
Wow.
That's not like a sure answer, but we'll go there.
Would you rather have written Die Hard or Lethal Weapon?
Lethal Weapon, 100%. It's brilliant.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're flying through. This is the final one.
Okay.
You ready?
Oh, God.
Would you rather have created Xena or Indiana Jones?
Oh, I hate you so much. Oh, God. Oh, I'm
Xena or Indiana Jones?
You're making me cry. I'm crying right now.
Keep in mind, you love both of them. And if you choose one, you will never touch the other franchise.
Oh, God.
Are you choosing not to answer?
I'm paralyzed.
You look like me I was at a party this weekend and someone was like, karaoke? And I was like,
How dare you put karaoke anywhere near the trauma I'm experiencing?
Your facial expression, you looked like you wanted to leave and you looked like what I looked like.
I think I'm leaning Xena.
Wow.
Because of the fantasy element to it versus like the history element.
Right.
I think.
That's taking into consideration you recently saw Harrison Ford and cried at his appearance.
It was so amazing.
All right. Xena. We'll go Xena.
I feel like if I saw Lucy Lawless, I might also cry. I don't know.
Yeah. Just from knowing you, I feel like you would be like, that'd be cool to see.
All right. I hated this.
That's all. I'm done.
Should we just get into our topic?
Yeah, let's do it.
Broken. All right. Interstellar, written and directed by Chris Nolan, has been re-released in theaters, as we discussed very briefly in a This Week in Writing last week.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been sticking with me so long that we ended up deciding to do a topic. So it's been re-released in IMAX. It has so far made $21 million in its re-release. They've been sold out every single time to the point that secondhand sellers are selling them for $200+ per ticket.
Love it.
So they're re-releasing it a third time in theaters, which is why we decided to do this, to hopefully encourage people who have not seen the movie or have not seen it since it came out to go and see it in theaters, go and see it in IMAX. It was very inspirational for me to see it again. And this is a movie I've loved, and I'm surprised I knew it so well, given it's been many, many, many years since I have seen it. But that just goes to show, I think, how much it impacted me. Mostly what I was texting Josh about in this last week of having come off of seeing it again was the world building aspect. And we're going to call this episode Nolan Corn. So I couldn't stop talking about the corn in this movie and how genius the corn was. And so what we're going to do is talk about Interstellar, talk about the good parts about it, that the world building aspects that we really, really love, and break down how he accomplishes it, because he is one of the masters at world building. And I think one of the things he does so well in this movie, just as a general overview, is that it's a sci-fi movie because it deals with space travel, but it's also a sci-fi movie because it takes place in the future, and he makes us forget that. Because it doesn't feel like the future. It feels like right now. And we later realize as we watch the movie that we are not the Matthew McConaughey character. Like, the world hasn't just crumbled in that moment. We're probably John Lithgow, or even like John Lithgow's parents. It's unclear. And I think that's really interesting.
Wait, you're saying the perspective is from another character?
No, that we, the audience. If we were a character in this movie...
Right.
We would not be Matthew McConaughey. He's like our child or our grandchild in terms of like where the movie takes place in time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, that's and yeah, you had touched on. We're going to touch on the corn of all of this that crack this open. But I think what Nolan does so well, especially in Interstellar, and I think he somehow accomplishes this in writing and all of his movies, I think, is he's so practical in everything he does. I'm not an expert on world building, so just cut me off at any point here. But I feel like anything I've read, or even if I'm trying to write it or something, it can be overdone when you know an idea is like cool. And you're kind of like leaning into that when you're writing this. And you're like, oh my God, this is, there is a, certain robot that's existing on top of this hill. And you just kind of like keep going back to it. Whereas I think what Nolan does is he just kind of offers these things in a very casual, practical, like, oh yeah, there's the robot over there. And it's just part of the world. And I think he does that with such confidence. And so therefore you're like, here it is. This is it, which is a good lesson.
It's so subtle, which makes it feel adult. It makes it feel sophisticated. And it makes you, the audience, feel very smart because you get to have these little aha moments along the way as you watch. And they could be small and they could be big, but you are engaged with the world. And I think that is what makes his world building so special versus someone who directly tells you that this is a sci-fi movie.
Right.
And we'll get into what that means filmmaking wise, but like real quick, I think it partly means like the point of view of the camera. The camera can tell you everything or it can tell you little tidbits along the way. And I think that's what he's so good at, is giving you the tidbits. And every shot is so intentional in doing these little tidbits. And again, we'll get into it. I think the baseball scene is a really great example of how he like sprinkles in world building stuff without explicitly telling you. And I think I talk a lot about this because I'm always trying to achieve it. And it's so difficult to do, which is to make the audience feel engaged with the movie process, experiencing the movie as it's happening versus literally sitting back and having the movie being told to you. The movies that feel kind of cheesy and light are movies that do that. They just explicitly tell you what the movie is so you can shut your brain off and just exist in it. Versus like the experiential process of Interstellar and all of Nolan's movies makes you lean forward and really engage with every frame because you never know what clue he is feeding you. And I think that's just a fantastic thing and something I aspire to.
But when you're writing your world buildings, do you feel like you have to explain to the reader what something is in the world that is like maybe would otherwise not be there?
I don't want to. But I think about it a lot, whether I do or not, because I don't want the audience to be confused. However, in talking about the audience experiencing the movie rather being told the movie, a part of that experience is because you are emotionally invested in the character, in this case, Matthew McConaughey, whatever he experiences or does or engages with, you feel like you're engaging with that as well. So if he very offhandedly engages with a robot, as if that robot has always been there and is not news to him, it's not news to me either. And like, that's so cool that this robot is just part of the way that we live our world. So I try not to. I try to have, if it's familiar to the character, I just have them act as if it's familiar to them. And the audience will understand.
That robot scene is amazing because it feels like it's out of like left field. Like you're just, you see it and you're like, Jesus Christ, a robot just attacked him. And then he wakes up and then he's like criticizing the robot, and the robot's clunky and it looks like how I think probably what a robot would look like. And it's just there. It's casual. There's no other robots brought up throughout the earlier version of the movie, or like
the first half.
The first half, excuse me. And it just shows up. And I think that's the stuff that I think is the Nolan confidence, that maybe in lesser hands there would be robots kind of walking around the farm.
Yeah, there's two things that I think help you with that scene a lot. One is that early on in like all the farming stuff, the farming setup of the movie, the first act with Matthew McConaughey on the farm, there are clearly, there's a drone at some point, which we have drones, so okay, whatever, no big deal. But the second piece is that the tractors are all humanless, driverless. They drive themselves, and at one point there's a malfunction and he has to deal with that, and that's the only reason we know that they are driverless, is because there is a malfunction that happens, which already sets up like we're slightly in the future and that some kind of robotics is possible. And then he meets this like crazy ass futuristic robot, and then he actually gives us a lot of exposition in his reaction, but the acting is so good and the emotion behind why he's saying those things are real and true to that moment. And so it doesn't feel like exposition. It feels like him being pissed off that there's this fucking robot in his face. Get it the fuck out. Where's my daughter? And the exposition that he has is that this is a military robot. It can't be trusted. These things should be dead by now. So we understand that this thing, like why this thing was created. And I do think that if Nolan had not given us that exposition from Matthew McConaughey, it would almost feel weird that the robot is there. But again, because he's so familiar with it and talks about it in this way, you're like, yeah, it's fine with Matthew McConaughey. He understands why this thing is here. And now I understand why it's here, because it was a military robot that's been repurposed. Okay, we're good. Let's go. Let's move on.
Yeah. I was thinking, does that robot then kind of open the world up a little bit?
100%. Yeah.
Like that little subtlety of, okay, here's a robot. And then that's like step one. I guess arguably the driverless tractor could be step one. But that robot really puts you into the world, because after that, it just, now we're like, here's a spaceship, we're traveling, NASA's gone, there's this, all these different things, and you're going into outer space, and we're off and running.
It's this really cool onion that just keeps unfolding until, boom, you thought this was an office building. It's actually a space station.
So crazy.
And we can travel through black holes now. Yeah, it's nuts. I actually want to start at the top and talk about the opening, because I think the opening is sort of a microcosm of the macrocosm in terms of how good he is at building world in these subtle ways. And also the fact that so much actually happens in this opening, even though not a lot happens, if that makes sense. So the opening, if you recall, it's very beautiful. It's very artistic. And because so much is going on, again, it forces us to pay attention in this really great way, where we're not confused. Like the moments and individual shots he gives us, I can understand them completely on its own. I don't understand the context of them, like why we're here necessarily, but I understand the information being given back to me. So that's what makes it intriguing versus confusing. But I just want to break down the opening a little bit, and then we can kind of talk about each piece. So it opens on the daughter, Murph's bookshelf, You see this layer of dust on it. There's dust also like kind of gently raining down. So there's some kind of dynamism in the shot, meaning like something is moving within the shot that gives it a little bit of life. And then the camera, it pans across the books and it ends at this little toy spaceship, which is when it starts to fade out and the title fades in. So right away, just that tells us this is a movie about spaceships, which I think is really smart. Then it fades into a talking head of an old woman who is telling us that her dad used to be a farmer, just like everyone was back then, which is already interesting because what the hell time period are we in if everyone used to be a farmer? And this woman is not wearing like weird sci-fi clothes. She's not in front of like this really clean backdrop. She's actually just in front of a bookcase. So she could be in any time. And I think we're sort of programmed to think she's kind of in the past. This the way that the frame looks behind her. And intentionally, Nolan is giving us this documentary kind of like Great Depression, Dust Bowl era feel. But then it cuts to the old woman says, "Oh, but my dad didn't start as a farmer." And then it cuts right to a spaceship careening through the air. And you see it's Matthew McConaughey piloting this thing and he's losing control of it. So now we definitely know that we don't know what era we are in, that Nolan just basically pulled the rug out from under us. He made us feel like we're in the Dust Bowl, but there are spaceships here. And so now I'm intrigued. And by the way, the spaceship looks like a spaceship from our time. It doesn't look futuristic at all. It looks very real and tangible, which I think is all very cool. So Nolan has immediately disarmed us right from, shot 3. He's forcing us to pay attention to him. And then after Matthew McConaughey crashes, which you don't see the crash, you just sort of like sound effects does a lot, and the way he's choreographed the scene does a lot. We then cut to him waking up in the middle of the night. We're wondering now where we are, what happened to the spaceship, was that even real? And then McConaughey looks up and he sees his daughter, Murphy, and she asks him if he's had one of his nightmares again. So now that's new information that helps us put things together. That spaceship crash, that was in McConaughey's past. It's still something that clearly haunts him because he's having nightmares about it. So now him being a farmer, but that old woman said he didn't used to be a farmer, now makes sense. It wasn't all explained up front. We were getting clues along the way. And it helps me because now I feel like I'm putting 2 and 2 together and I'm answering my own questions that he's bringing up for me in the movie. And then Murphy says, "I thought you were the ghost." And it's kind of like a throwaway line. McConaughey says something very dad-like about how, no ghosts, like there's no such thing as ghosts. And he's really just trying to make his daughter clearly feel safe. Then she says, "Well, Grandpa says you can get ghosts." And now we know Grandpa's a character. Okay, that's good information. And then McConaughey jokes how Grandpa only says that because he's close to being one of them. So we already are getting McConaughey's relationship with Grandpa, whom we'll meet later as John Lithgow. That maybe it's a contentious relationship. We'll see that it's kind of this playful one where they sort of do these little insults back and forth all the time. And this convo, it plays out as a normal family conversation. But when you rewatch it, study it, because this is how you do a normal conversation well. So that's doing a lot for you. I think pay attention to the direction, to the acting, to the writing in this scene. Because first, it takes the entire scene for McConaughey to recover from this nightmare of crashing the spaceship. So clearly, the information we are absorbing, even though he's not telling us this, he's telling us this through everything but dialogue, is that this crash in this spaceship was a really big deal in his life and that it somehow torments him. And that will become a major reason why we understand later why he chooses to become a pilot and do the thing he does for the rest of the movie, is because of this scene. We get it instantly here. We also see that his daughter does not say things like, "Dad, are you sure you're all right?" Nolan is just letting us watch it, and because we're humans, we understand what's happening. We also introduce the notion of Murphy's ghost, which ends up being extremely key to the entire movie, and it happens here in the opening. But here, it just plays out as a kid who has an overactive imagination, and Dad is trying to make her feel safe. So we kind of forget it for a while. until it becomes the thing that it is. And then we were like, holy shit, this is why this movie feels so genius, because it was planted all along. It was right in our face and we didn't put it together. And that's the cool experience of the movie. So just in this opening of like 2 minutes, you get crash in the past, ghost, grandpa. Then finally, McConaughey walks to the window. He looks out over these endless cornfields, and it happens very fast. In fact, I didn't even notice it till I rewatched it this morning, but you can see a power line in the shot that is broken. So the wires are just like hanging down. So this is a world that does not have power anymore. But again, the camera kind of lets you see it if you see it. If you don't, no biggie. There's a lot more clues to be had. Again, this puts you in the place of being a detective as you're watching, and I love that shit. So he's now standing at the window looking out at this corn, which allows us to have the transition to the next scene, which is the old woman talking, again, like a documentary, about how we had endless corn. There were other crops, but those crops died from the blight.
The corn.
Corn is so key. The corn is set up in the opener. It's very important. But what I like here about the dialogue is it uses the term the blight. She says the blight killed the other crops. And the way she says this is as if we in 2024, or whenever the movie came out, should know what the blight is. And we don't. So now, again, we understand that we are not, even though these people look like us and they feel like us, they're in a different time period than we are in. And that then leads to a bunch of talking heads after that of people talking about the dust, the endless dust. And it turns out that Nolan actually asked for Ken Burns' permission to use interviews from his documentary on the Dust Bowl. So they actually plugged in real people.
Oh, wow.
And it's very cool, and it feels that way. And to me, it feels like it always really grounded the hell out of this sci-fi movie. And Nolan himself said, and this is his quote, is, even though it's a science fiction film, I wanted the feeling of dread, the feeling of imbalance between the human race and the planet to be real and credible. And that's exactly what it does. It grounds you that this is real. And then he intercuts these real life talking heads with shots of his own characters, like sweeping the front porch. And as one of these men is talking about how back in the Dust Bowl, he used to put his plates upside down so they wouldn't get dusty. You see that McConaughey's family is doing that too. And I think the genius close of this opening sequence is that you see, the bowls are being picked up and they're wiped off just as this man from the Dust Bowl is talking. But then right next to the bowl, McConaughey suddenly wipes dust off a freaking laptop. And that unlikely juxtaposition of feeling like you were in the Dust Bowl and now, oh shit, that's right, we are in the future, or we have computers. It again immediately perks you up and sort of gives you the unexpected. And I'm going to shut up now about the opening, but I think that alone is like a master class in how to build world.
I don't know what else to say. I think
I'm done. Like, that's it. He's just a genius. Go see this movie.
No. That was, I just to tack on, not even sure how to follow up with that, but you mentioned the Yankees, that part where they go and watch the baseball game.
Yeah.
I just love that part. Again, so
good.
Subtle. They're like, oh, this was the Yankees. And then Lithgow makes that comment of, like, I don't know. They're basically like, when they even introduce him, they're like,
he says that you shouldn't have popcorn at a baseball game. It's unnatural. I want a hot dog.
Right.
Corn, Josh. It all goes back to corn.
Do we have to talk about the corn?
We're going to talk about the corn. I want to talk about a few other beats first that are extremely good world building. And again, so talk about the baseball scene since we're here. There's some mention of, like, back in my day, this is from John Lithgow, like, the Yankees used to be a real team. And the camera reverses and we see we're basically playing on, like, a high school field. And that's very funny. And then in the background, you see, I don't remember exactly, but it says, like, Major League Baseball's New York Yankees, right? So, like, but it's not, the camera doesn't focus on that. It's something that your eye picks up in the background of a shot that is doing something else. It's showing the baseball team not being the greatest baseball team in the world. Their outfits are clearly not very professional, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole feeling of the frame is the idea that this is, we're in a future where Major League Baseball is no longer Major League Baseball. And that itself is really fucking cool.
And that also, what I love about that, and you kind of touched on this earlier, is that's the first, maybe not the first, but that is an indication of how far in the future we are, because then you're like, oh yeah, I am John Lithgow because I remember when the Yankees were that team. So it's like one generation apart or two generations. And so it's not that far into the future, which I think also adds to the unsettling nature of, wow, this feels so real. And there are some issues in the world. Is this going to happen to us? And I feel like that also is, that dread is constantly there in that first half of the movie, at least.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It's so good. And I think in this scene, and I may be wrong, but I think in this scene, as John Lithgow is talking about the old days, and I think he says something like to McConaughey, like, do you remember that? And he says, no, in my day, we were too busy fighting for food. And it's a throwaway line. I don't even know if like the camera is really on McConaughey as he's saying this. We're looking at just a bunch of other stuff, having fun with baseball. And we hear this like sort of off camera line from McConaughey, which does exactly what you're saying. Like it positions us now in, okay, we're actually John Lithgow, or maybe even his parents. And that's pretty fucking cool. Again, it's not focusing on things, but letting the audience pick up on it.
Yeah.
Another big world building thing I want to talk about before we get to Corn, because Corn happens much later in the movie, is the school scene. Do you remember the school scene? I know you haven't seen this in a while, but
I actually just watched it like 2 months ago.
Okay. So McConaughey is going off to work, and John Lithgow says there's like a parent-teacher meeting that you have to go to, and you're the parent. You got to go do this thing. So Matthew McConaughey takes his kids into school. There's a whole set piece about him chasing a drone on the way to get there. So that's some world building stuff. But that to me was like less interesting than getting to school, where he's meeting with the principal and he's meeting with their teacher. And there's two aspects that really position you in the world. And I think what's so cool about the scene is we're in there from the perspective, again, of a father who cares about his children. Okay, so that is the overwhelming emotion of the whole scene and what directs the whole scene. But the principal is telling him here, your son, your older son, played by Timothée Chalamet.
Crazy, by the way.
Crazy.
Yeah.
He's not going to be an engineer. He's not gonna progress to college. Your son has basically been sorted into the farming class. And McConaughey is pissed. He's like, what are you talking about? He's 15 years old. Like, I didn't even figure out what I wanted to do until I was however age. Like, why are we limiting him now at 15 years old? And you get this back and forth that is emotionally charged because it's a dad trying to fight for his kid in a conversation we are actually very familiar with seeing or being within ourselves, of a counselor or someone telling you your kid's grades aren't up to snuff. They're not good enough to make it to college or whatever. But the conversation is tinged with world building, wherein the new stuff is, we only have so many slots for college. We don't have a lot of colleges left. And those few slots are reserved for people who have better grades. And he's just not going to make it. And we need farmers more than we need any of these other things, because our problem today is that we are starving, not that we need more microwaves and TVs. So deal with this. Your son is going to be a farmer. And so McConaughey like sort of gets over that. He's still really pissed and seething from that. And then the teacher says, and also your younger daughter, we've been having some problems with her. She's super, super smart, but she's been getting in fights. And he's like, fights? Like, that's not like her. And we've met her. So yeah, that is not like her. What's going on? And teacher says she brought in this book, and she's telling other kids about it. And he takes the book, and McConaughey's like, oh yeah, this is my old textbook. So again, we're getting history about him. He used to be in college. He used to study. I think it's a science book of some kind. And the teacher says, yeah, it's a problem that she's telling other people that we used to go to the moon and that we used to have these space missions. And he's like, you don't think we landed on the moon? Which, by the way, back then didn't hit his home as hard as it does now, where people are sort of denying a lot of real science things. And she's like, basically like, sir, no, I don't. I don't think that we did. I think what we did was we wasted a lot of money and a lot of infrastructure on this dream of going to space that never paid off. And we forgot that Earth had problems. And she has her own thing. And you're like, whoa, shit. Now I understand the history of what happened to like make the Earth be what it is now. Again, fucking genius dialogue. And then it kind of cuts out of that, and you see that McConaughey's like, yeah, I got you suspended from school. Sorry, kid. But that scene is the dialogue is so smart in that. And I think, again, the key to why it's so smart is it's emotionally charged from everybody. Everyone has their emotional opinion, and then they're just using a familiar conversation to talk about it. And I love it so much.
I love it too.
We can talk about corn now.
Let us talk about corn.
The scene that I texted you about was a dinner scene. Later, much later in the movie, second half of the movie, Murphy has grown up. The Timothée Chalamet character has grown up into Casey Affleck. And they're now having a family dinner. Dad is off in space. He's nowhere to be found. And we have gotten the sense that the world has gotten worse since Matthew McConaughey left. Just little things people have said. Also because Matthew McConaughey's mission was to go off and save the world. And he continually reminds us of that as he's out there. Like, my kids could be dying. Like, we got to fucking save my kids. So we know that something bad is happening on Earth. So there's this family dinner. And back in when we first met the kids when they were younger, there were different crops. They had, some were dying from the blight, as you remember. And Matthew McConaughey in particular had mostly corn, but there were other crops. At some point in the movie, when Matthew McConaughey finds NASA, he is told that by Michael Caine that corn will eventually...
That so properly, Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. That corn will also die, and that other crops are dying. Like, we're having a serious problem here. And even within the movie Okra, a nearby neighbor who grows okra, his okra crop is burned. And you see that happening, and it's just like it's sort of just like it's a thing that's happening over there, but it's mentioned as, again, a world building thing. So, okay, so that's all context for this dinner scene that is not about corn. It is not even about what they're eating. It is about other stuff. It's about their shit, the family shit that they're dealing with. But in foreground is a baking dish with a corn souffle of some kind.
Yeah.
And on Murphy's plate, she's the only person whose plate we see, there's a bunch of corn stuff on it. And then the wife says to Murphy, would you like some more? And Murphy's like, no, because she's clearly sick of corn.
Yeah.
And then the wife turns to the son, who's like not even really on screen. Like, you kind of like see the son's hands.
Yeah.
Like, that's really
I remember
it.
that.
And you don't even see his plate. And the wife says, eat your fritter, honey. So not only do they have corn souffle here, but they also have corn fritters. She doesn't even say the word corn. Nobody says corn in this entire scene, but it is visual, and you hear fritter, and you get Murphy's like, I'm sick of eating fucking corn, and it does so much, and I'm just so excited about this corn.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how it all came to be. Tasha was like, they don't even call it corn. It's fritter. But it speaks to the subtleties of Nolan and the lived-in feeling that he somehow creates in the world building. He just does it so well. I was thinking, like Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter. As you love Harry Potter. And I love the world building in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But because there's wizards and it feels a little different. I feel like Nolan always has the practical world building. And so it always just feels so real.
Yeah, and Harry Potter, they'll get a broom and someone will say, that's a Nimbus 2000. That broom flies. Like stuff like that obviously we're not doing in this movie. And it has a different effect. Okay, there's one other thing. There's NASA. The discovery of NASA, I think, is another great world building tool that he uses, where Matthew McConaughey basically randomly finds this place in the middle of nowhere that's just like a chain link fence that says do not enter. And he's very curious about what the hell's beyond this random fence in the middle of nowhere, that he gets bolt cutters and he's about to go inside. And then suddenly there's like a bright light in his face, and you hear people who are clearly guards, though you don't see the people. Also very cool. Get down, like, get on the ground, put your hands in the air, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly he wakes up. That's the scene that Josh was talking about. He wakes up in front of this robot, and he freaks out at the robot because he thinks it's a military robot. Anne Hathaway comes in and says, he's been reprogrammed. Don't worry. He's no longer in the military. Stand down. And then he is taken to his kid, because that's all he cares about is give me my kid. And it seems like we're in like a very dangerous secret place where And I think we believe this, even though Anne Hathaway is so calm and put together, we believe that he might be in danger because of how he's reacting. He's a very smart man who's been in the world, and he is scared that Anne Hathaway has somehow killed his daughter or imprisoned her or something. So we buy it. But she eventually leads him just like into a conference room, an everyday conference room, and his daughter is fine. But still he's on edge because there's a bunch of people in suits. Who the fuck are these people? It could feel like kind of CIA-ish. So what the hell is going on? And then finally Anne Hathaway laughs at him and is like, who do you think we are? And he's like, she says, we're NASA. Like, we're all that's left of NASA. And like, knowing who NASA is now and seeing these people basically like hiding in this little bunker in the middle of nowhere.
You can't believe it.
You can't believe it. It does so much world building. And I think as an audience, everyone is like, whoa, wow.
Yeah.
Like that's, whoa. That's a really cool moment for everyone when they realize that.
And that's such a good point that is great world building. Whereas I feel like when you think of world building, sometimes you actually think of building a world, but that is just done within the context of what life is now and like the subtleties of what Anne Hathaway is saying. And you're like, wow, this is where we're at now. This is what happened in the world. And yes, because we know what NASA is. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And that's just another example of making the audience figure it out as they go. We don't know it's NASA before he does. We figure it out when he figures it out. And we are in the emotional state of Matthew McConaughey, your main character. So that is a really important tool to keep in our tool chest to remember in world building, that if we are putting our audience in the place of the character strongly enough and in their emotions, we can experience the world the way that they do rather than tell them things. So that, you know, because there is a tendency when we're world building to make sure the audience is not confused about the space that we are in. But I strongly believe that if the character that we are investing in is not confused, neither will the audience. But that requires you to really emotionally invest people in that character. So you have to do that work first in order to buy in to the second piece that we're talking about. So that's
Beautiful.
all. I struggle with it all the time. You know, like there's always, I always have an insecurity of like, fuck, the audience isn't going to get this. I should have a line, just like a throwaway line, just to, you know, but my tendency is always to like try to pull back as much as possible. It's because I love this shit. That's it. I'm done with my rant. Thank you for letting me talk about Nolan Corn.
I love how excited you are. This is perfect. This is great.
All right. Quote of the day. First, forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. Habit will help you finish and polish your stories. Inspiration won't. Habit is persistence in practice. Octavia E. Butler. Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at ActTwoWriters for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram or on Twitter and Blue Sky, Tasha 3.0.
I'm Joshua Hallman on Twitter, Josh Hallman on Instagram.
And as always, the Act Two podcast is a production of Act Two, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist.